Hi, since I've been hearing a lot of questions about how to format a poster, I thought I'd do a video. And of course, you're going to be formatting your own poster pretty soon. So, in general, when you're making a poster, the best software to use is actually some sort of oral presentation software like PowerPoint or Google Slides or something like that. I'm going to be using PowerPoint today because that's what I use, but you can follow similar procedures using Google Slides, and I have had many students who have successfully used Google Slides to make a poster. So the most important thing to know before you start is what size does your poster need to be? When you know that, what you're going to do is you're going to create a single slide presentation where the size of the slide is the size of your poster. And so let's go do that right now. So I'm in PowerPoint right now, although you can't see it because I've hidden my other presentation. And so I'm just going to open up a new file, and I'm going to skip the design ideas because I'm just doing this myself. And I'm going to do two things. First, I'm going to go to the layout and I'm going to make it a blank slide. I think that just makes it easier. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the file menu up here, and I'm going to click on page setup. And so right now this is set up on my default, which is a widescreen presentation, and I'm going to change it. So I'm going to make this a 48-inch wide by 36-inch high slide. And there's nothing on the slide, so it doesn't matter what you click here. And now here's our slide. It doesn't look much different other than the aspect ratio has changed a bit. But you'll notice that even though this looks relatively small here on my screen, down at the bottom here, you can see this is only 25% of the slide. So if I went to 100%, whoop, you can't see the edges. This is the thing you have to understand about creating a poster, is this is going to be a very large file. And so you're going to have to be zooming in and out a lot. You're going to have to zoom out so you can see how everything looks on the whole poster. And you're going to have to zoom in so you can actually look at, where the words are and what words you put in. So another warning that I need to give you right away is that this is going to be a huge file. And depending on how much RAM you have on your computer, it may start giving you errors. And so the first thing I do when I'm making a poster is not to make the poster file that I was just showing you. The first thing I do is I go into a regular PowerPoint, if you want to think about it that way, just a presentation with multiple slides, and I start thinking about the text that I'm going to put in, and I write it all in the regular PowerPoint because it seems to take up less memory when you have lots of little slides rather than one big slide. So my computers have always been happiest if I make it on little slides first. And then what I do is I have both PowerPoint documents open, and I just cut and paste the text from the little slides onto my big poster slide. So there's usually a lot of pre-planning, and you'll notice that this is what I've been having you do. I've been having you create your methods and whatever on just regular slides. Once you start creating the file, you should save it a lot. Speaking from experience, these things, especially as you add more and more graphic elements, this thing is going to get to be really huge, and it will crash your computer at inopportune times if you don't want to lose a lot of work. So I save my file all the time. And the last thing you can do to kind of manage the fact that this file is huge is wait and save your pictures until the very end if you can. And we'll talk about saving things for the very end as we set up our sample poster. So the first thing that you need to do is you need to think about a color scheme. And specifically, you want to think about what's your background going to be like? How are you going to separate one section from another? And what I have here, I've shown this picture before, but the blue poster is mine, one that I made. And the other poster is from my lab mate from grad school, Kelly Rowe, and that is actually Kelly down looking at my poster. We had a lot of disagreements over the proper way to format a poster. And so we argued about, should it be mostly white background or should it be a little more colorful? So obviously you can see we never actually agreed, and you can see that we ended up with two posters that look very aesthetically different, even though the layouts are very similar. Back to our poster. Even if you think you want to do a photo background, and we'll talk about that later, I highly advise you to start with a colored background or a white background if you're going to do that, and then add the photo later, because the photo, again, is going to make your file huge, and I do recommend adding that at the end. But if you are going to use a photo long term, maybe pick a background color that's similar to the colors in the photo so that you can judge color contrast, etc. And so there are a couple of ways to change the background color. The easiest way is probably to click on the Design tab right here, and then there should be a button for Format Background. That will pop up your little side menu here. And so you can do a solid fill, and I don't like any of their default colors, so you can go to More Colors and you can change picking colors. I like a big color wheel, but you could pick, you could pick a purple or a blue, right? This is the color that I tend to favor, but what the heck, let's do something a little different. Let's pick this color right here. So here's my color. And if you wanted to do a photo, what you would do is you'd click on the picture or texture fill, and there's picture source. You can insert a picture, but I'm going to go back to the solid fill. Okay, so I picked the background color first, and as we go ahead and put in sections, you will see that you want to keep a consistent color palette as you design your poster. You also want to pick a consistent font palette, if you want to think of it that way. You basically are going to want one or two different fonts. No matter what you do, you should always choose what they call a sans serif font for titles. And then for the regular text, a choice of either sans serif or serif fonts. So what is a sans serif font versus a serif font? That's from the French. This is a default sans serif font on PowerPoint, which is Calibri. This is a serif font. This is Times New Roman, also a very commonly used font. And you can see by looking at them, these are very different. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to have some larger font size words over here, and I want you to focus in on the F's here. So if you look at the sans serif font and the F, what you see is the lines are consistent thickness all the way through, and the ends are very square, maybe just a little bit rounded, but mostly square. If you look at the F here on our serif font, Times New Roman, you can see that it's not a consistent thickness throughout. So some parts are thinner, some parts are fatter, and they have the little flourishes thing. So specifically down here at the base of the F, there's that kind of flattened part. That's the serif. So why would you choose one sort of font over the other? Each type of font has its own specific advantages. The sans serif font is good for reading from a distance, and that's why I recommend you always use it for titles. You'll also notice that in PowerPoint, both the heading and the body fonts are sans serif because you always read PowerPoint from a distance. But when you're actually doing large masses of text, there's a lot less eye strain if you have a serif font. That's why if you look at an actual print book, it's almost always written in a serif font. Times or Times New Roman or Century New School Book or Garamond, I think, are the four that I used to use a lot when I was doing ebook formatting. So that's what you need to think about. So I traditionally use a sans serif font for my titles. I use a serif font for any large blocks of text. So you can't just pick good fonts, right? you have to pick the right font sizes. So all of your section titles should be the same font size. All of your text should be the same font and font size. And basically, what size you actually pick is going to depend on the font that you pick, because some fonts are naturally bigger than others. In general, I found that somewhere between 60 and 84 point is best for the main title. When you're putting your names under the main title, no less than 48 point. And then your general text is going to be 18 or 24 point. I usually use 24, but I have seen people get away with 18 if they're using a largish kind of font. When you have headings, for example, breaking down your methods into here's the titration part and here's the metal analysis part, just make those somewhat larger than the general text and figure a way to set them off. Depending on what the heading is, I usually use bold. Sometimes I'll use underline, and you'll see that. Figure captions can be slightly smaller than the rest of the text, but I definitely do not recommend making them any smaller than 16-point font. So everything here is going to be considerably larger than you'd make if you were making a written report. So popping back to our poster here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an area for the title and authors on this paper. Okay, so I'm going to start by picking a shape, and I like to use, you can use the square shapes. I always use the rounded boxes, but that is completely personal preference. I'm going to put in a shape. Now, you can see that PowerPoint for some reason likes to start off with blue, and you can change that if you go to the shape format. I'm going to fill it with white, and I want to put a nice border on here. I want the border to be a color that coordinates with the background that I picked. So what am I going to do? I'm going to actually pick the background color. There's a reason I did that. Now I'm going to go back and I'm going to click on more outline colors. The default is my background color, and what I'm going to do, I'm just going to make it a bit darker, and that's how I know it's going to match up. Okay, but the problem with this, if I click off it, you still can't see the border very well. So I'm also going to go in. You can actually do this over here. The line, let's make it bigger. How big do we want it? You just have to kind of play it by ear. Let's try 6 point. Yeah, okay. That looks pretty good. Okay, now I'm going to add my text. You can see it all fits on one line. I made this 80-point font Calibri. Again, that's a nice default sans serif font. Now, one thing you can do is you can just put in text box, make the fill on the text box white, and put a line around it. However, it gets a little hard if you're trying to put a whole bunch of things with different font sizes in there, and so I tend to just cut and paste and just add other text boxes. Now that's 48, which I said was the minimum. I think I'm going to make that a little bigger. And when you're creating a poster, you always want people to see your institutional affiliation. So I do that two ways. First, I put a little footnote here. And you'll notice, so now I have my little footnote note that says where it's from. The other thing that I like to do is I like to add a logo. And so I have a copy of the Evergreen logo. I'll pop that on at the end. But that is a logo. It's a picture. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm just going to put a little shape right here to remind myself, right? That's where the Evergreen logo goes. So you'll see that I do a lot of these little reminders of this is where this thing is going to go, even if I'm not putting that in here right now. Okay, so I talked about this before, how your poster should have the same sections as a paper. Introduction, methods, results, discussion. So you'll frequently find a conclusion section in there that's really part of the discussion. what you need to do is figure out how you want to lay these out on the poster. So what we're going to do, we're going to make some shapes like the one I used to create my title box. And we're going to map out where we want our introduction, where we want our methods, where we want our results, and where we want our discussion. So now you can just create more shapes. You know what I do? Because I'm lazy and I don't want to pick the same fill and line color / width options. I just take this shape and I just copy and paste, and then I change the size. Remember that you always want to think about how things are going to progress from left to right and from top to bottom. So I think I'm going to put my introduction right here. I think that's about the right size for the introduction. Now you can see when I size this up, now we have really rounded corners. I'm not sure I want them that round. You can actually adjust that. There's this yellow box here and you can see there. Now they're a little rounded. That looks right. Okay, here's my introduction. And my methods is going to go right below it. And this is going to be, again, I'm just cutting and pasting. Here's going to be my results. And it's probably going to be more like this. My discussion, so we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. Again, top to bottom, left to right. And now, what am I saving this space for? So I'm going to have space for acknowledgements and references. That's what I'm going to put down here. Okay. And now what do we need to do? Now we need to add text boxes that have okay, introduction, and to keep the formatting the same, I do a lot of cutting and pasting methods. Now, as I look at this, I'm asking myself, do I want this to be black or do I want it to be something that matches? Could I make it brown? Meh, that's too light of a brown. Could I make it a darker brown? Yeah. Does that stand out enough? So you kind of have to play with it a bit just to get a feel for what it's like. All right. Okay, so what I have now is I have a big overview, right? We're still zoomed out to 25%. But even though we're zoomed out to 25%, we can still read almost everything. There's a couple things that are too small to read, right? There's a little institutional affiliation below my name, and there's the little text on the box that says Evergreen logo. So now what we want to do is we want to start putting in text and stuff, okay? So what I have is I have this PowerPoint that has text in it. You'll notice that when I did this, I did not set it up the way that I normally set up a PowerPoint. This is actually text formatted about the way I want it to appear on the poster. So in particular, this is Times New Roman, it's size 24, which is what I use. Here's the stuff for the introduction, this slide and the next slide. So what I'll do, I'm actually going to cut and paste these text boxes in here, okay? And you'll see, they don't always pop up where you want it to, that when you put it into the large file, this is just tiny in comparison. So if you actually want to be able to read what it says, you're going to have to zoom in, right? There it is. And now we can just go back and forth. This looks like a lot of text. It is a lot of text, and we're going to make it a little fun. I'm going to put this one over on this side. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to spice this up by throwing in some pictures. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to throw in is I'm going to throw in a map. I don't want to put the map in first because it's a picture. So I'm going to take a shape again, draw in a box, and say Bud Inlet locator map. Now, the one thing that I like to really pop out that's part of the introduction is research questions. So I have this text box with my research question, and what I'm going to do is I am going to actually outline that before I pop it in. That should go down here somewhere. Okay. So you see this problem, you try figuring out what's going to go in each section, and you type it all up in your little PowerPoint, and then you start cutting and pasting it in, and you're like, wait, this doesn't quite fit the way that I want. So then you have to think about how to rearrange it. Here, one thing I could do is I can actually change the size of these text boxes. That takes up less room. Maybe we can make the map a little smaller. And then let's slide this up. You see we've got all the space over here. And so you're going to be doing adjustments. Now there's actually room where you can see the research questions. It doesn't overlap anything. You can see what we're doing there. Now I'm going to do the same thing with methods. Now methods is interesting because what I'm going to want to do, oops, I think I've still got a little extra room here. So I'm going to slide this up. I need more room for methods. In methods, I have subsections. Sampling, let's make that a little smaller. So it's obviously a, oops. So it's obviously a subheading. So I've been adding stuff, and one thing that I've noticed is that even though these were originally Times New Roman size 24, sometimes the text size changes as you move things around. So you have to make sure that your font size hasn't resized as you do this. So you can see that even though I haven't added the pictures, I can get a good feel for how text heavy this poster is just by looking at my layout here. Obviously things change as you start putting in the actual photographs, but that's okay, right? So you can see in my methods, I'm planning to put in pictures of all the different instruments that I use. Now, results. You are lucky in that you're working from a paper and so you already have the results. Amazingly, oftentimes you don't. And so I have been known to still be getting results even like a week before the conference. Because conferences happen when they happen. They're never when you want them to happen, like when your research is actually done. So you're often throwing things together at an inconvenient time. And so, you know, you can start building a poster even before you get all your results. That's the way I've always done it. How can we do that? Well, you could think about what sort of results are you going to display, right? So even though you don't have your results, you can mock up the results that you think you're going to get, right? So you can have, here I'm looking at the correlations between these three parameters. And that tells me we're going to have some graphs. And so basically what I've done is I've added spots for graphs. I put in little blurbs where the text is going to go and what I think I might be saying there. I may not know what my results are going to tell me, but that's what we can do right now. Let's zoom back out. Okay. And you can see that I zoom in to do close-up work. Then I zoom out to kind of get a feel overall of how the poster is looking. Like right now, I see there's this big white space over here. Do I need to make my graphs bigger? Would the graphs be too big? Do I need to come up with something? Is that too much space for results? Do I need to add more space in the introduction? Right, so I could like expand these and shrink that. So what you'll find is it's very much a situation with lots of trade-offs as you're trying to balance between putting in all the information you want and getting the boxes just the right size so that all the sections fit together harmoniously and also include all the things you want in those sections. Let's talk about references. I think it's really interesting. Anytime I look at a draft for references, what I see are full references. When I say full reference, this is what I mean. People are just going to put in the full APA reference, and that takes up a lot of space, right? So what people usually do on posters is they actually do an abbreviated reference. By the way, we also do this in oral presentations. We just throw the reference on the bottom of the slide that you're referencing that source in. So basically, you're just going to put the name of the first author, okay? So we're going to chop off everything, including our PI and me. It's very sad. And I'm going to take out the title. You say, no, really, how are we going to find it? Well, you've got the year, you've got the journal, and you've got the volume number and everything. You can find something off of this. And I'm just going to pop that down to 18-point font. And look, we fit it all in one line. So that's how you fit all those references in without taking up huge swaths of your poster, is basically you give them just enough stuff that you can find it, but not do a full APA reference. So once you've gone through and you've mocked up the entire poster, then you can go back and you can start inserting the pictures, right? So let's throw in this picture of Capitol Lake. I'm going to take that out. I'm going to insert a picture from file. Now you see that when I actually put this picture in, it's not the right size, so we're going to have to readjust the size of the text box with the accompanying picture. We can throw in our bud inlet locator map, and go back, you look and you're like, hey, these research questions here, maybe those should be centered. I still don't feel like they pop enough. Let's change the shape outline to red. That one. I like people to zero in on the research questions. So we could go through, and I have pictures for all those. I'm not going to throw them in right now, but you get a feel for how you can just quickly populate that. It's already starting to get slow. As proof of how the processing power is slowing down, I'm just going to zoom in on this text right here. And you can see, wait, oh, look. You can see it's got the brown background, even though when you zoom out, it's got the white background. And so the computer is having a hard time keeping up with this. And that's really common with these large files. Okay, that at least gives you an idea of what it's like to make your own poster. So really, the best way to do this is to just play around with it. Try out 2 or 3 possible different layouts for your poster and see which one looks best. That's really all there is to it. Hope this was helpful.